I'm Frank Tiano, Assistant Superintendent of Schools. Thank you so much for joining us as we break down the proposed budget for the FY17 school year for the Framingham Public Schools. With us today to walk us through the budgeting process and the numbers is Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Stacy Scott. Dr. Scott, thanks so much for joining us and making yourself available.
Definitely a pleasure to be here this evening and a pleasure to be able to walk the residents of the town of Framingham through our process and our goals for the budget this year.
All right, so let's jump right in. Every spring, the school committee needs to submit a proposed budget to town meeting so that they can appropriate the funds so that the school department can operate their schools for the following fiscal year. Before that happens, there's a long, engaging process throughout the school district. Can you walk us through that process in budget preparation?
Absolutely. The process actually begins very early in the fall. It begins with strategic planning. Each school is looking at its strategic planning for improvement and is looking at what it needs for the year to come, assessing its progress from the year past, and that rolls into a process where they articulate what are their needs for the next year. And they begin articulating in October and November what are the various things that they think that they're going to need based upon our projected growth for the year to come. Each week we're monitoring the number of students that are coming into the district, leaving the district, and the overall ongoing gain in terms of students within the district. By December, we have amassed all the requests from the schools in terms of what they think they need. We put that into we compile that into a cumulative document that we use in December to make a projected initial budget request to the town. This is the earliest actually that we've ever actually proposed a budget for the town. It used to be February or March that we were beginning to lay out official numbers for the town. We're trying to move that as early as possible to coincide with the town's budgeting process for all of its other departments. So by December, we're giving general numbers in terms of what we need for staffing, what we need for expenses, and the additional salaries categories that also helps us with substitutes and other special needs. By January and February, those numbers begin to become a little bit more specific as our projections for next year become a little bit more reliable. And we're engaging then by the end of February with the school committee and determining what they would like to propose as the budget for next year. By February and March, we're talking with all of the town committees about their concerns and questions around capital budget or the standing education or ways and means or the education committee and talking about what their needs are going forward. Oh, the finance committee is the final one.
Can't forget them.
That's right. We also had a joint meeting even last night with the town board of selectmen and our legislative caucus. Everyone gets involved in looking at what are our needs, what are our revenue sources, and what should be the right projection. And we try to come to agreement with the town on the budget going forward as we come to town meetings. Some years it's harder than others. This is probably one of those years.
So it doesn't always go as planned in terms of the needs for the school department, but you work collaboratively with all town departments and all town committees to find the best number.
Absolutely. Well, the goal is to give them as much information as possible. I think this year we've given more information than we've ever given before on the data that we use to look at what's going on in the system. How many classrooms do we need in the year to come to meet the needs of our students? What are the data coming in? It gives us an indication of how many students we're serving and what staff will be retiring or what staff will be going out on leave. And we crunch all that information together to make a determination of what number of students we're going to have. What staff do we need for that? How many classrooms do we need to outfit for the year to come? You know, we're opening a new second grade in our newest elementary school next year. So, of course, that requires some new teachers and supports to make that happen.
So the investment that the town is making is paying dividends for Framingham Public Schools. Could you talk a little bit about some of the highlights for our school district?
Absolutely. Well, the first dividends that the town is experiencing is just a well-run system. I mean, we have some of the most talented teachers around. Teachers apply to come and work in Framingham from all over the state, and we're very proud of the teachers that we do have here. And we have some of the best students around, too. As you know, they're champions in so many important areas to us. In academics, many of our students are taking APs more than before, and a very diverse group of students taking AP tests. Many of them score 3s, 4s, and 5s on APs, and that performance has won us national acclaim just in terms of the progress that we're making in students taking those challenging courses and those highly regarded assessments. We have students that are national champions in things like robotics, and they're going on to the World Championships in Tennessee for the VEX Robotics competition. Our students in drama, winning the state drama competition, just an amazing play that they produced this year. Our students are excellent in jazz band, they're excellent in wrestling, our diving competitors, our champions. I could go on, and I'm afraid I'm going to have forgotten a few. And so maybe we'll show more of some of those things in our highlight reel.
That's right, because we happen to have a clip put together by some of our students here at Framingham High School that will highlight some of the amazing things that our students and our staff are engaged in here in Framingham Public Schools. And when we come back, we'll dive right into the numbers.
And where down we go, 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 go. Oh, where down we go, 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 go. So where down we go, go, go. Way down we go.
And we're back, and we're taking a look at the FY17 proposed budget for the Framingham Public School District. Dr. Scott, I know you brought a presentation for us. Why don't we dive right in, and perhaps you take us through the numbers.
Let me offer some opening comments,
Sure.
just to kind of get us started. What most folks know is that we have engaged in a long-term planning process. When I first got here, we have a Vision 2020. It's our 5-year long-range strategic plan, and we keep to that very, very carefully. And each year, the goals within that specific area, we use those to manage our planning and our focus for the year to come. We use a variety of data points, from enrollment data to student performance data, to determine where do we need to emphasize to support students so they can do better, and what new students are coming into the district, in order to figure out what grades are they coming in, what are their needs, and how do we serve them best. One of the things that we did a couple of years ago was we created a long-range plan for the budget. And we tried to create a 7-year projection to engage the town in a conversation around what do we imagine our costs might be over the next several years. This isn't, of course, exactly what we expect necessarily to get, but it's an attempt to create a conversation around what do we think our drivers for the budget, our key costs might lead us to in terms of expenses. And so what you might notice in this particular chart is that in FY17, we projected in 2014 that we would need at least $124 million to be able to continue our programming as we moved forward. And you'll notice on the second line that we were attempting to put into the discussion a conversation about the fact that every year our student numbers are growing. And our demographers have said very clearly that we should expect more growth every year for the next several years. Now, it may level off eventually in the lower grades, but that wave that's moving through the system, it will in a few years hit the high school and carry through for several more years. We asked our demographers to update our demography in the last 2 to 3 weeks, and just today they gave us a new report that updates those numbers. We thought that we would on average be increasing about 60 students per year. I was pretty confident that that was not going to be enough. Today they've indicated that we should have about 130 students new each year for the next several years. Part of what we have to do, if you go 3 years ahead, that's 500 new students. That means really it's like adding a new school to the district at that time. We've opened a new elementary school, but already that school is full. And we are needing to make sure that we don't overload that school and the other schools by overpopulating them, so we're being very judicious about that. So we need the funds to be able to manage programming, staffing, and resources for those students as they come into the district. So in terms of our school budget for this year, you can see in FY16 that we began with a town's proposal for $114.9 million, and the school proposed about $116.5 million to try to create a level service going forward. Our actual school's operating budget that was approved by town meeting was $115.7 million. And we did get some additional funding by the valiant efforts of our legislative caucus led by Senator Spilka, and they gave us I wish it was $100 million. They gave us $1 million over the summer to meet very specific needs. We used that money, half of it for teachers, particularly for our English language development classes, and then the other half for a combination of needs, special ed, and general education needs for our students. And we also had worked hard last year to save some money to be able to use in the subsequent year in order to meet specialized needs, and so we were able to do some additional staffing with those funds as well. So as we move into this year, we're proposing a budget of $124.9 million to the town, which is an attempt to carry forward our base needs and also to be able to manage the small degree of growth that we need to manage a new class at the King Elementary School, and also some additional needs that we have within the system to manage compliance for English language development, our special ed needs, our general needs, our needs for increased rigor for our students, special education, training, professional development, etc. The town's proposal for us going into this year, using its annual projection of 4% increase per year, is $120.3 million. They have identified a few $100,000 extra dollars that they also will probably add to that number. We're still trying to determine what adjustments that will make in our overall budget. But the proposal at this point, 4% per year, brings us to $120.3 million. Our challenge is that our enrollment continues to grow. As I indicated earlier, 60 students per year was an average expectation for us going forward, and yet this year, if you take our October 1 number, which is the number we report to the state each year, we had 219 new students in our official number this year. As you'll notice in the bottom of this chart, for 2015-16, our number was 8,219 students. That's our official number. Now, beyond the official number, there are more students actually coming to the district that we're serving. Some of them come and may be with us for part of the year, and some of them may come and other students may in fact leave over the course of the year. So there's a net change of students over the year. I think I'll come back to the number of students at sort of our gross and net figures for the year as we go forward. But as we project the numbers forward that our demographers have told us we should expect, you can see clearly that we'll go from 8,200 to 83, 84, 8,500 over the next several years, adding 100, 130 students per year over the next several years. If you add anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 a year per student, it's not hard to imagine that for every 100 students, you need to add another $1 million to your base budget, or else you won't be meeting the needs of those students coming in. So our enrollment is variable year to year. As I mentioned, our official increase that the state will use to determine our monies for fiscal year 18 is 219 students. And yet, our overall number of students that come into the district each year is always higher than that number of students. So this year, for example, while 8,219 is our official number, the total number of students that we have served this year is actually 9,117. That includes our students in pre-K, it's about 259 students in pre-K. It includes the students that are out of district, it's about 242 students that are out of district this year. It includes the students that may come, and also there may be some students that also leave over the course of the year. So it includes all the students that we're serving, pre-K, out of district, and students that may be here for part of the year. That's over 800 students that we're serving that are not necessarily on the official rolls, but we do serve them. Those students come,
Absolutely.
they register, they get a tour, they may have assessments that determine what their needs are for special needs or English language learning or SAGE, our gifted and talented programming. Those are students that register and they're seated in a classroom for as much of the year as they're with us, or they're there for the rest of the year, and another student may leave. So the total number is over 800 new students coming in throughout the year that we're serving. And yet the net number is a much lower number. So we have to serve the students that come to us, and we make provision for them throughout the course of the year. If you just take 1 month as an example of the students coming in, you can see, looking from March 1st to April 1st, you can see how at various levels of the system, students are coming, and these schools are impacted by the number of students that are coming. And so this gives you a sense of the difference between March 1st and April 1st as our students are coming in. So for example, if you look in the elementary schools, for example, 35 new students just in this 1 month. Now of course we have 10 months in the school year, so that's why it's not hard to imagine several hundred new students coming into our elementary schools per year. In Brophy and Wilson, 100 new students over the course of the year would not be an exaggeration by
No,
any means.
170, almost 200.
Yes.
And more importantly, those numbers are net. So that doesn't indicate that there's 35 elementary students who have entered the district.
Right.
There's more than that, including the students who have left.
That's right. That's right. Those are just the students in this 1 month in terms of the income and not necessarily any of the outflow. And so you can also break down those numbers by different categories of students. In terms of general education, you see the numbers fluctuating up and down. As students move, we have a lot of parents that will have new jobs and move to other towns. And you'll have a variety of reasons why parents are coming and going. Students in a variety of categories, from bilingual education to special education, coming in with a variety of different kinds of needs. And so we monitor students coming and going throughout the year, this just being 1 month as an example. And our team is very careful to know where they're coming, what grade level they're coming and going, and how do we make sure we're meeting their needs. But it's a large number of students moving back and forth, and we have a very talented team that supports them. But it does take a lot of work. 800 new students is like having 2 new schools coming into the district over the course of the year. Even if only you have a few hundred of them by the time the year ends, that's still like another small school. Right. And we struggle to meet those needs. Sometimes it's hard for folks to understand why is it that we may be adding staff over the course of the year. Other departments don't necessarily have to do that in the town because there's not the emergent wave of students or crime wave or fires within the town that necessarily require immediate action in order to meet their needs. And that's part of the reason why our staffing is variable in relationship to those needs.
And beyond the numbers as well, as there are families attached to these numbers.
That's true.
And so for when we have children enter the district, regardless of what level, we want them to feel welcome. We need to place them appropriately. And also, too, for the students that are moving through our school district who are leaving us. And for example, an example maybe at the Wilson Elementary School, you may have a net gain of 25, 30 students there, but they have serviced over 170 students through that school so far. And this is April. And when you talk about the time and investment to making sure those children are well taken care of and their families and feel welcome, it's a constant transition that is difficult to put numbers around.
Well, it is. I'm glad that we have such a dedicated staff. They work well beyond the call of duty to actually meet the needs, in this case, of those 170 new students that are coming in. And that's a school that celebrated this year becoming an International Baccalaureate School, which is an acclaim that only a few elementary schools in this state have, or even very few in the country. So they're on a trajectory to be one of our most extraordinary schools, and they do it with style. And they do it with both Portuguese and Spanish for all students. That's a very exciting proposition. But it's a challenging weight for them to carry as they manage the changes within our town.
That's right.
So, you can see that we bring additional staff in as we need to. Some of these numbers are just positions that are moving from one one unit to another, teachers to administrators, associations. They're not necessarily adding new staff, but this is sort of where we track additional numbers moving throughout the district. Our major increases for fiscal year 17 have included a variety of critical areas that are basically the bills that we have to pay as we move forward in the year. Each year, as we move forward, our staff, especially in the new contract that we have a cost of living increase. It's exactly along with the national average of 1.7%. And so our staff are able to sort of keep up with inflation in that respect. And the other increases in terms of base increases in salary are for teachers that are continuing their education, and our salary schedule allows them for an increase in relationship to those additional improvements in their qualifications. So those costs to us will roll forward every year, and that's about $3.5 million. The state did bring additional funds for us, and so we hired $1 million worth of additional staff, as you saw on the previous slide, in order to meet the needs of half of it, as I mentioned, for bilingual needs, and the other half for general needs within the system. And a variety of other new positions that we had in the budget, $1.2 million that also met the general needs within the system in terms of additional staffing. We opened a new first grade this year, and other staffing throughout the district. Also, there are those who are not in the associations, and so their general needs are also met in the non-bargaining increases. So that's about $6.4 million worth of increases that are just obligations in the contract and moving the basic system forward. There are also a variety of areas where we have expenses as we go forward in the year. A few of those, for example, are our special education needs. Those needs are driven in some part by tuition and tuition increases. So we can predict a certain amount of increases that will roll forward into the next year. So for example, we have about $2 million worth of projected increases in the next year. Also, we have about $1.7 million worth of expenses that we experienced just this year that will roll forward into the budget next year. Some of that through tuition increases, some of that through what the state calls restructuring. It allows some of our partners to raise their rates according to the law. And then we have students that move into the district over the course of the year, and that can sometimes create additional expenditures in order for those students to have their out-of-district placements.
Excuse me, Dr. Scott,
Absolutely.
but when you mention tuition, you're talking about students who leave our district because their needs are unable to be met here because of the severity of their disabilities.
Yes, often a student will move in and they may have an out-of-district placement where they're coming from, or in our assessment of them, they may need an out-of-district placement, and so we're obliged by law to make sure that they are placed in an appropriate program for themselves. We've been very creative over the years of creating programs inside the district that enable us to be able to, rather than referring out, which is much more expensive, to actually create programs that allow us to hold students in the district. We have each year 1 or 2 programs that we are putting in place each year to sort of continue to keep our costs low. That's why the numbers of students who are in out-of-district placements has remained relatively constant over the years, proportionally, so that the number that we have now is not very different than the number we've had 5 and 10 years ago.
That's a wonderful opportunity, to keep our students in district, keep them in their neighborhoods, with their friends and family. And out-of-district tuition, typically what would that cost?
Well, it can range anywhere from $60,000 to $90,000 on the low end in terms of someone who is living at home and being transported to an out-of-district site. Often those lower rates are for collaboratives that we work with. The Accept Collaborative, one of our primary partners that manages needs of our students, as well as the Tech Collaborative, the Education Collaborative. And so their programs are on the lower end, although there are transportation costs, which are almost equal to the tuition at times. They can range to $150,000, even at times as high as $300,000 for a special need for a student, and so we are obliged to meet those needs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So as I mentioned, transportation costs are also there, and we renegotiated the contract this year and at significant savings, because instead of going for brand new buses, we were able to continue using the buses that we had been using in the last several years, and that saved us a considerable amount of money. Also, increases in our overall cost for buildings and grounds are things that we often also plan for, and so that also leads to some very basic needs going forward.
Yes, it does.
So our plans in terms of investment in the year to come include looking at those contractual increases that I've mentioned. We also have some obligations to meet compliance needs that the state or the federal government place upon us. And in particular, the needs for bilingual education supports are an area where there is some compliance. The state changed its regulations in August and kind of increased by about 50% the amount of time that students should get in terms of support for English language development. And so if you were supposed to get 60 minutes, if you were a more experienced student, now you get, or if you're a less developed student, you get 90 minutes now. And for students that are more advanced, instead of 30 minutes now, they get 45 minutes. So that means that the bar is raised, and we have to increase the staffing that we have in order to meet the students' needs in those areas. So we've articulated a very specific request of $750,000 in order to be able to make sure we add to every building the additional staffing necessary. And it supports all of our students,
Sure.
as do all of the services that we provide, whether for special needs or for language development. Ultimately, because those staff are in those classrooms with all of our students, because of our inclusion policies, those resources are helping all of our staff, I think, to be stronger and to be better. We also have needs for additional salary. Those are just for substitutes in other areas, so there'll be an increase there. And as I mentioned, special ed increases and other expenditures throughout the district, those raise our costs overall. So we have to make those investments as we go into the year ahead in order to be able to survive. We have worked hard to kind of squeeze wherever possible to find areas for savings in order to be able to just be very judicious and careful with our spending, recognizing that the town has limited resources, and we need to try as best we can to manage our growth as slow growth, if at all possible. So we have identified that we had put in additional monies in the budget for kindergarten aides, thinking that the governor might continue to downgrade funds in that area. Fortunately, he has not for this year, at least one more year.
That was good news.
And so there's $250,000 there that we saved, $244,000. Also, we're going to keep our spending in terms of expenses at our schools level again. They had been level for several years. We increased them into this year, but we will be level for the next several years, probably, and ask the schools to make do, and they've done a good job with that. We'll probably make some savings in terms of retirement and attrition. One in particular position that we have looked at that we probably will not renew, so there'll be other areas where we will gain in terms of attrition. In terms of some programming that we can probably find some grant funding for. Our after-school programming is sort of one example of that. In our educational operations, most of our curriculum work is coming out of that office.
Right.
Professional development for teachers, building new curriculum, and supporting the SAGE programming and other important programming, digital resources, programming. Our students love IXL and 10 marks kinds of online learning, so it supports those efforts. We'll pull that back by about $77,000 if our proposed budget goes through. Otherwise, we'll probably pull it back by a whole other $100,000 more if we have to. And so we have other areas where there's collective bargaining adjustments, meaning that because we've renewed our contracts, we're able actually to save some money from the old budget, because we've been able to embed some of these funds into the salaries of staff, and so we can pull those out and obtain a savings that way. And finally, we're able to defer some projects or find some other sources to try to do some of the playground repairs and other things that our parents are certainly eager for us to do. It's good for the safety of our students, and so we're trying to slow some of that down in order to prepare for a tight budget year. So that gives you some sense of the ways in which we're trying to be frugal as we move forward. Other areas certainly where we're using retirements or we're using attrition to kind of slow down spending as much as possible, and that's making it possible for us to have brought the budget down to the level where we currently are.
Right.
So finally, in terms of looking at possible areas of shortfall, the current budget we're proposing does not allow us to do everything that is necessary. We're trying to do a reasonable amount of work to make sure that we're in compliance, trying to use attrition and reductions where necessary to streamline the work that we're doing, both in central office and in the buildings. But if we are asked to be at the $120.3 million proposal that the town has as its 4% increase for us this year and for the years past and forward, that would cause us to require some reduction in force. that would be more significant than the cuts that we have looked at. We would need to cut fairly deeply to find, $4.5 million worth of cuts. And so we might have an impact on staffing, of course, and we would struggle to meet the compliance needs that we've set forth. So there's been a kind of a cry within our community for more resources so that our teachers know their students are getting the time on task to be able to get the minutes that they need to build up their English language skills so they can fully engage in the classroom and learn as fast as our teachers know that they can. So we will have difficulty doing that. We may well, certainly at 120 million, we will be out of compliance in some areas because when the state checks in and their compliance check next will be in September 7th,
Sure.
we will, they will find us out of compliance, and at that point they will direct us as to what we would do, what we must do in order to meet their objectives, and there'll be a date certain by which they will check, and at that point they begin to identify what the penalties or challenges to the system will be to cause us to move forward. Some of our programming will need to be reduced, and I worry because we've been able to grow in some important areas that are important to the town. We have built areas that I think that our citizens have been really excited about. Our Mandarin programs
Sure.
have found from K to 12 a real following. Our STEAM programs have built a sense of excitement as more watching students in maker spaces building houses, and is really an exciting thing to see, and we want to continue to develop that programming. Our students in SAGE and our students in a variety of programming that builds their capacities is exciting for us. We don't want those programs to be at risk. Our students learning language in elementary and middle school is important, I think, to their neurological, psychological, as well as academic development. So we want our students to be able to grow in those ways, and so those programs would be at risk if we are not able to continue moving forward. There would be a variety of unmet social and emotional needs. Part of the growth, and I would say if you go from back to July 1 to now, I think that the figure is about 848 students all told that have kind of been coming into the district from then until now. The net, of course, October 1 being 219.
Sure.
The net going into next fall will probably be in the 350 to 400 range by the
Once
time
all said and done.
all said and done. So we will manage those needs. But a lot of the new students coming in, certainly usually a proportion of them will have a variety of special needs. Some of those will be social and emotional needs. The number of students with experiencing trauma is increasing. I think it's increasing in society as we're watching our young folks come into our school. I'm seeing my colleagues experiencing this all around the region. So we're trying to build up our capacities. We're fortunate to have at least one social worker at each school, a psychologist at each school. But if you look at the ratio of like 2 social workers to 2,000 students in the high school, anyone looking on would say that the ratio there is not adequate, and that doubling that or tripling that would not be exaggerated. And so we know that we have to build up our capacity in these areas, and so we're eager, but we know we have to do it slowly, and as a town that invests in education, but we have meager resources, we have to be judicious and careful. But there may be unmet needs there. We certainly don't want to lose any students, and we certainly don't want our students to feel stress beyond measure because we can't support them in the way in which they need to be supported. I've mentioned the compliance needs that we have, and there are regulatory implications to not having the resources to help students to have the mandated experiences that they're supposed to have in the district. So we'll be judicious and try to do as much of it as we can, but we're worried that we may fall short if the budget is cut severely.
We're definitely a school district that is moving forward, and that bears out in the data. That bears out it passes the eyeball test. When you look at students and they're engaged with their teachers in quality education, quality curriculum, it's a pleasure to watch them, and we need to make sure that they're moving forward in that capacity.
Well, I think that's part of what makes us attractive as a district is that we embrace all of our students, we embrace their learning needs, we embrace their diversity, we have champions in our district in so many areas, both in the arts and in athletics and in academics, and our students shine, and they shine around the country, and it's exciting to watch. Framingham is a place that people know about.
Right.
And we want to keep it that way, and it requires taking this talented staff that we have and supporting them. I can tell that they are challenged and stressed by the hard work that they put forward. They need to know we're behind them, and we know that resources are limited. We're going to put forward a budget that is as judicious and as modest as we can But we're trying to also be very articulate about what the needs are that exist so that we can advocate for a budget that makes sense.
Dr. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time and being with us today. Would like to thank Michael Goodman and Derek Sachs from Access Framingham. Would like to thank you for tuning in for this special Framingham Public School presentation regarding the FY17 budget. For more information, please go to our website at www.framingham.k12.ma.us.